Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the session. We're going to be getting started here momentarily, and thank you so much for joining us. It looks like we have over 40 people so far, and keep people still joining. This is actually the peer-to-peer virtual conference. This is the third time we've run this, and it's brought to you by 5 different companies that serve nonprofits that have come together to share unique experiences and knowledge within the sector. The companies are Accelerated Charity Growth, Cathexis Partners, HEP Data, Op3, and Twilio.org. My name is Mark Becker, and I'm the founding partner of Cathexis Partners, and I'm happy to introduce each session in today's conference. During each session, please feel free to submit your questions in the question and chat box in your GoToWebinar control panel, and the session speakers will answer questions towards the end of the session or along the way as we can. Please note that each session will be recorded and made available online after today's virtual conference, and we'll be sending out links to that once it's available. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Erica.
Great. Thanks so much, Mark.
You bet.
Sorry, I still see start broadcast. Is my screen up?
It is.
Great. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. I'm Erica Halpand from Op3. I've been working in peer-to-peer events for about 18 years now. I worked with another company than Op3 on the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention's inaugural overnight back in 2002. And in 2006, I was fortunate enough to, with Op3, have the opportunity to continue work on the overnight for AFSP. And Nicole, who's with us from AFSP, I'll let you introduce yourself. Nicole, do we have you? Nicole? All right, I know she's there. Can anybody else hear Nicole? And it's just me that can't. Can you type in your question back to me, guys?
I think she's saying that she's having technical issues with her phone at the moment. She has just static at the moment.
No problem. I'll give you the quick intro, and she can jump back in when she redials or gets that straightened out. But Nicole actually worked with us at Op3 on the overnight back in 2007. A few years in, moved over to be part of the AFSP staff directly, and has now become the senior director for Out of the Darkness Walks. And that includes not just the overnights, which are a lot of the examples we're going to talk about today, but the community walks as well, which is hundreds of walks, thousands, probably tens of thousands of participants, and millions of dollars each season. So an awesome longtime partner and all-around general great human and peer-to-peer person to know. I'm really happy to be presenting with Nicole today. We'll get right into it. We will get right into it. Mark, my screen's frozen. Here we go. And basically not letting a bad experience cost you fundraisers to create. We're doing 5 steps for event day success. Why do we care about repeat participants? Great question. According to an industry white paper, which I know you guys are inundated with all the time, but this is a great nugget to know. This white paper reviewed 15,000 events between 2013 and 2015, and the average walk with no fundraising minimum had 37% of participants return to an event for a second year. The important thing to know about them is that they tend to be your best and most effective fundraisers, and their average amount fundraised in this particular study in 2015 was $135.82 versus $52.89 average raised by new participants. So there's a ton of other compelling reasons, but this alone should make a strong case for investing in a well-produced event, and that doesn't necessarily need monetary resources all the time. You can have a really well-produced grassroots event as well. So that gets us to step 1, which is designing the right event for your organization. I am going to go through this kind of quickly, only because designing the right event was originally designed as its own session, but most people here already have an event. So I'm going to ask a few questions just to give you kind of food for thought And hopefully these are going to come in handy when that new board member who just got into cycling decides you need to add a bike event. Have some questions to ask around goals and things that can set you up for success before just adding things to your portfolio or creating new events. It also could be useful in helping you see your existing event kind of through a different lens with fresh eyes and finding things that you can add or even subtract that will help you better engage participants and kind of improve their experience overall. So here are some of those questions to think about in terms of setting your event apart and providing unique and fun guest experiences, connecting people with your mission, and kind of offering unique sponsorship activations. So those are the questions, but how does that translate? What does it look like? What does it mean? What does it mean? What does it look like? Well, it might mean a tent full of therapy dogs. It might look like giant inflatable darts. It might mean putting some of your participants on a boat because your ceremony site is a pier you've outgrown. It might look like a new way for people to share why they're participating. It might mean making sure every kid in the top trot is #1 and feels like a hero. It might look like a cool and playful partnership activation, in this case, the Cadillac of camping. It might mean creating opportunities to honor participants and showcase their impact. Or this last one in the top left, it might look like connection, visibility, and a reason to reach out. Let's look at the overnight honor beads. At first, you just see beads, right? But when you know what they mean, you can really see that there's so much more and that their specific visibility invites connection and gives the community a reason to reach out to one another. Nicole, do you want to talk a little bit more? Not necessarily, I think the honor beads are fairly self-explanatory for people, but if you're back, kind of the other local flavor things we talked about.
Yeah, and can you guys hear me?
Yep, we got you now.
I'm sorry about that. We are having some technology issues here. So yeah, I think the one thing that's important is to look at both the things, the elements that are kind of unique to your cause that help build the community, like the honor beads, but also maybe some things that happen locally that can kind of add a little bit of flavor to your event. So for example, I was just in New Orleans for our community walk there, and one of the things that they do is they have a brass band that's playing all during opening that made it just really feel like you're kind of at a New Orleans street event, and something like that probably wouldn't work for every walk that we have, but it felt really authentic and built the community there. And they also do kind of these umbrellas that are really traditional there. They call it the second line that goes out. So little elements of like the local culture were infused into that event to make it feel really special and unique for that community.
Very cool. Budget's something else important to keep in mind. Beyond tents, tables, chairs, toilets, all of those hard costs, consider what your event costs you in staff time spent managing committees, and efforts, staff or otherwise, to secure sponsors and donations. And with respect to donations specifically, I would say take a hard look at in-kind. Defining what really adds value and enhances experience or reduces expenses can really help you make better decisions about what opportunities are worth your time and resources or worth your staff's time and resources. If you've got someone making a ton of phone calls and sending a ton of emails, chasing down $150 worth of granola bars, that's maybe not as good as if their time was spent coaching on fundraising, making sure someone shows up, and interacting with a donor, those kinds of things. So, super important budget note kind of on that count. The next is sort of sites and routes, and this is really about what your key criteria is. So we need a site that can hold 5,000 participants, or we need a marquee site that will appeal to participants who might not otherwise be interested in our event, or we need a route that doesn't require road closures because our budget's really limited, or we need a certified course because this is a qualifier for another race. Whatever it is, getting everyone on the same page is really the best way you can set yourself up for success and have the appropriate time to plan, and you're not rushing, which is when a lot of these kind of pre-preparation things get missed. Excuse me. Similar to knowing your event requirements, in this case, let's say you need to begin marketing your event 9 months out. You need to know how far along you'll be in the permitting process in order to publish and promote your date or route. And that's the way some of those hard logistics can actually be a really great sales and marketing tool for your team. The more that you can tell someone about the event and make it real for them, the better, the better your team is equipped to kind of sell the event. Because really, at the end of the day, that's what you're doing. And it's hard to do with no information or a ton of coming soon, coming soon, coming soon on the website, which all too often happens. So here are some of your questions just to think about, to bring back to the office. And next, we're kind of going to start getting into a lot of detail, which is where you get into the pre-planning work. What I want to say about this is that the overnights are really complex. These are significant distance walks of 16 to 18 miles. They have multiple anchor sites. There's a ton of moving pieces, and there are huge numbers in terms of crew, volunteer, and staff support. And crew are actually volunteers that pay to volunteer and are with us for the entire event, which is a whole separate group from volunteers who are more day volunteers, as you know them. So some of this is going to be way more detail than many people might need, particularly if you have a 5K or a stair climb or a stationary bike event or something else that happens all on one site or has a much shorter time frame than dusk to dawn, which is when the overnight takes place. But even the documents that don't apply to you or you think don't apply to you may inspire you to create something that does, something that can improve your event in some way. And beyond that, I know one challenge that all of you guys share is staff turnover. I'm sure everyone here has been guilty of letting that one coordinator or manager handle everything for a particular event. And honestly, you were probably so grateful you could count on them to cover it. But then they leave, and you're left with no institutional knowledge and really limited historical information about your own event. And that learning curve is steep, and it starts all over every time. So I would ask you to consider that some of these documents, really all of these documents, these are a way to combat that turnover and reduce that learning curve for new staff when you are having them. So not much of a secret, and nor is it likely to surprise anyone on this call, but regardless of distance, activity, or number of sites, peer-to-peer fundraising events are just a lot of work. That's really the bottom line. There's no getting around it. The smallest, most grassroots event has plenty of moving pieces all on its own, even if it's only on one site, even if it's only a few hours, one morning once a year. There's just a lot that goes into an event. So again, no secret here in the pre-planning work. It seems fairly obvious, but you'd be amazed how often common sense is anything but. A timeline like this one, just a little snapshot, it can be a great way to keep yourself on track and keep everyone else on the same page. I'm not gonna belabor every document, but I just wanted to give you guys some snapshots of things that might be useful or things that may have a column you didn't know you needed but could be helpful to you. Here's another snapshot. This would be an example for a series where maybe you need to maintain a 30,000-foot view of multiple event cities. And this sort of overview can keep you from getting caught up in the minute details, or it can alert you to areas of inaction where you may realize that you need to dive in more deeply in those particular areas. Again, no secret to anyone here, the work doesn't stop until after the event, and sometimes not even then. Printing checklists like this one can keep everybody on task ahead of time and help make sure every role and area gets the tools they need to be successful on event day. If you don't think this impacts participant experience, let me explain how it does. Registration forms, donation forms, as long as there's still pieces of paper that we need to help process participants or donations. I think many of us long for the day when it can all be digital, but those iPads don't work great in the rain, and I think everybody's got that paper plan B backup, even if they are digital. As long as we have all of those guest-facing documents, not having them in the right place, not having them in the right quantity, having them with errors, can cause unnecessary delays and be a serious problem for serving participants, efficiently. And anything like that that holds up their experience is obviously not something we want. Questions from that first session? We're going to try to stop along the way.
There was a question about what was the last column on the timeline?
Oh, sure. sneak back real quick. Can I do that? Yes. The notes column. So
yep, looks like the notes column.
Yeah, midway down, you'll see a couple of places where going through it was like, hey, adjust the timing, or this is new this year, and here are the other documents that impact. Being this prolific in terms of documents can be a blessing and a curse, because you need to keep them updated, because the last thing you want to do is create more misinformation or things that are incorrect that are out there. But very cool. Thank you.
And one of the questions was, any advice on or resources on budgeting examples for events?
Yes. They're very, it's so hard because they're really, really specific. I have a couple things that I can send out after the call, and I also definitely encourage you guys to reach out to Nicole or I with questions. I'm happy to share other best practices or documents or pick things up in your particular area of interest. So hopefully that will be helpful. In terms of staffing, it's not just about having the right numbers. It's about your staff knowing what's expected of them and having what they need to best support your participants. That's a really, really kind of critical thing. And here are the three things that kind of go into that. This, I think, is kind of maybe the budget type of example that you're looking for. But this is it for staffing. I think it's a little bit easier to do for staffing than it is to do for budgets. But appropriate numbers are obviously key. And I just want everybody to keep in mind, there's probably hundreds of variables that can affect these numbers. But it's a good starting point if you think you're under or overstaffed. And I think there's a lot to be said for having the right amount of people at the right time. We say a lot on our events, too many volunteers is as bad as too few, because you can't provide a good volunteer experience. I haven't found that to be the case with staff as much. We can always find things for staff to do, but you certainly don't want to be overworking any more than you already are the people that are working the event. So if you can spread that out a little bit and give yourself a little bit of cushion, depending on what your resources are like and who you need to keep in the office, it's just something to think about. The other thing for staffing is that preparation and training are really key. For the overnight specifically, we have a pretty comprehensive staff training manual. This has been developed over years. It's updated every year. I just thought the snapshot of the table of contents would give you a little bit of a sense of how much information we have to give someone. And again, this is an event with multiple sites and a lot of staff roles, but that event overview, that's just the one page, which is what kicks off the training manual. That's something that you could provide to everybody. I think there's a little bit more that everybody could know about their own event or whatever part they're not focused on every day. So this is something that can help with that. Correct assignment is also really key. So this has job descriptions regardless of what job you're in. We usually utilize an event buddy system as well. So if there's someone that's new to the event or new to that particular event role, we encourage them to contact someone else who's done it before, beyond just reading the manual, to get a little bit better sense of what they can expect. And just thinking about who is going to be in a really forward participant support, guest-facing role versus maybe a more behind-the-scenes production role. And I think there's a natural fit there for, you know, who's interacting with folks on a daily basis. It doesn't mean that everybody shouldn't be ready to have those interactions, but just like staffing in your real life, if you're hiring for a position, if you have the luxury of considering those skill sets, it's definitely something that can help you staff correctly. Organizing, packing, and managing supplies. With here, I would say a little infrastructure can go a long way. The manifest on the left is something that we use for rest stop supplies on the overnight. The diagram on the right is from a different event, but it's a lot of similar supplies, and there's some good packing notes in there. Sometimes people are visual learners. It's good to have this level of detail so you're not buying a flashlight to climb into a truck to look for the flashlights in the dark. I would pause for laughter here. It has actually happened. So anything that I say that is mind-blowing to you is not because I'm an event genius. It's because I've just been doing this for enough years that I've probably been bitten by nearly everything by now, and I try never to let the same thing bite me twice. You might think about like, oh, this is completely separate, it's behind the scenes, it's staff, how does this impact participant experience? Let me give you an example. This says this rest stop needs a long spoon. Why does this need a spoon? It doesn't really matter if it doesn't have it. So I'm not going to pack that, and I'm not going to say anything to anyone. Well, now those supplies get to the rest stop, and now the rest stop team can't mix the Gatorade. And now one of your participants is dehydrated, and now you're calling an ambulance. So all of these little things that you think don't have an impact really do in almost every supply, in almost every way, has something to do with supporting participants. I know all of you have probably been slaves to the timeline or run of show or had to create a giant bulky document. A simpler or more specifically relevant snapshot can be a little bit more user-friendly and therefore can come with less mistakes or less missed cues, if you were. Here's a couple of snapshots from the overnight, which just help. These are for staff specifically, but where do they need to be? Where are they meeting? What day are their meetings? Where are they? And what else is happening with those? The overview on the right, I stripped out the names and phone numbers, but here are the things you're doing each day of the event. And again, I know the overnight is more complex if folks are just showing up that morning, but this could even be for the week before in your office if you're organizing supplies or creating packets or that kind of thing. So something to keep in mind for staff user friendliness. Along with that, providing the right info at the right time is a common sense move. It requires some forethought. Again, common sense, anything but. So with a little bit of forethought, I think you can easily have the right thing at the right time. So on event, you want copies of the site plan for everyone who needs it. You want a site plan that has the labels, that has the areas clearly labeled, including walkout. And you want it, whether you're expecting weather or not, maybe the site manager's copy is in a sheet protector or it's laminated. Maybe the tables and chairs distribution is on the back, or there's extra copies of that, or there is a list on every tent that shows how many tables and chairs go there to help empower your volunteers to set up and not have 6 or 16 people standing around sharing one piece of paper. Sounds simple, but very often does not happen. The nice thing is that you can do a lot of this digitally now, even if you have a huge event book of information that can be shared digitally, or if you have just this one snapshot, several people can take pictures on their phone and use it that way. And that has helped quite a bit when things like this have run short in my experience. So pre-event, which is this left-hand letter, it's a little bit small, but my point was just a welcome email or a letter with the basics in it that accompanies that staff training manual and any travel documents in terms of people's arrival and departure. It's just a nice companion piece. It's fairly low effort and will be helpful kind of getting everybody on the same page even before they get there. Post-event, thank you, obviously most important, but also if you can pull participant or client feedback when that's appropriate, it's really nice for folks to hear that the work they did improved the world and change something for someone. They work really hard, and it's nice for them to hear that sometimes because they don't, especially for your staff that don't have regular participant interaction except for an event, it's really nice to hear. Instructions for next steps. So I know you guys have your bag fee or your cab home from the airport and you need to charge us back from that. Here's what that expense report looks like, and here's how you can get your money. And then, of course, the request for feedback. Your staff, this one gets missed a lot. Your staff and volunteers are really good listening posts for gathering info about what your participants like and don't like or would like to see added or removed. So it really behooves you to capture that data in some way. in the case of this particular email, this email precedes a link to a staff survey. It doesn't have to be big and lengthy SurveyMonkey survey, or it could be as simple as this email, just asking for direct feedback. That's something that can help you down the line, because those staff or volunteers are very often in the same position all day. So they hear if they hear the same question hundreds or thousands of times, well, that's something that we can either communicate better, or that signage can improve, or that we need to address in some way if it's, if it's a complaint or a request. Any questions in that section?
None at the moment.
Okay, great. Moving into volunteers. So volunteers require much of the same preparation, training, and care as staff. But the tricky bit is that they can't be managed the same way as paid staff. Managing volunteers is very, very different than managing paid staff. I hope you're still with us. If you're thinking you can check out and take a break because volunteers aren't your responsibility, guess again. Volunteers are everyone's responsibility. One of my missions in life is to convince everyone on every event of this. I know sometimes it can be hard, or you feel like you can't be bothered with more small talk or emotion or any more inbound or outbound communication than you're already handling. But if that's what you're thinking, consider that every volunteer is a potential future participant, a potential future and often current donor, and someone who can become even more deeply important to your organization in the future. And if you're still not convinced, maybe this will resonate. Being short volunteers or having improperly trained or managed volunteers can not only do serious damage to your event budget, it can make your event less safe for everyone. Not to be dramatic, but these are all real on-event pictures, and every single one of them is something that could have been avoided. It's something that ends up being under insurance deductible very often, so is directly being paid by donor dollars, and there's just no reason for that to happen. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox. We could spend days talking about recruitment. I know we only have minutes, so let's at least hit the basics. Most of you are doing some or all of these things, and if you're doing them all, well done you, keep at it. If you're not, think about where adding any of the things you're missing might improve your volunteer program, or if there's some small way that you can incorporate them. Here's another snapshot of a tool to help you keep track, or help keep you on track. You should use what's manageable for your organization. There's no perfect volunteer recruitment CRM or spreadsheet or book or way. Building a snazzy spreadsheet with conditional color coding built into your formulas, so cells are red for empty positions, they turn yellow when you're halfway there, and they get to green when a shift or spot is full. That's great if it's useful and if you have the time. But even a very simple tally sheet can help you wrangle the info that you need and can help you capture some of that data year over year, even through staff turnover, in terms of a final report that would show who actually showed up. And in a perfect world, was not just this tally of numbers, but had who those folks were. I don't have compelling revenue data to back this up, but you do want to retain your volunteers. You want to retain your volunteers just like you want to retain walkers or riders or runners. And here's the best way I know to do that, really. Training and motivating and empowering them. What's the best way? Well, it's pretty simple. You need to respect them pre-event. You need to respect and interact with them on event and teach everyone to interact with them on event, and you don't let them outwork you. My very first event job, one of our mantras was keep them safe, treat them great, work as hard as they do. It's something that we printed on our staff credentials even, and that's, for me, is as spot on now as it was 18 years ago. And when every staff member actively appreciates event volunteers, believe me, it does not go unnoticed. Again, volunteer soapbox, they're very near and dear to my heart. As with staff, providing the right info at the right time for volunteers is a common sense move. Here are some ways that you can manage it. Pre-event, this is an assignment confirmation email. It gives lots of detail for those who want it. People who want it and read everything, there's plenty of places for them to click to get even more detail. It helps us if we can get them to click here and confirm, and maybe that helps our retention. And it has the can't miss basics for the folks that will barely skim anything or read or respond to anything you ever send them. Even earlier than an assignment confirmation, I would say be careful about counting on auto replies. They are almost certainly losing you some people. Even with very little bandwidth, it's really, do what you can to engage volunteers who want it. It doesn't have to be all of them, but there are ones who want to talk with you earlier than just getting their assignment. And it's worth engaging with them. Reaching out to them, thank them, and asking for their feedback, obviously post-event, is another way to take advantage of that listening post. I would say that the thank you is as important as confirming where do I need to go, what time do I need to be there. They really can provide valuable insight into what your participants want. Here is a little tool that we have. It's an on-event FAQ card we turn into a necklace. You see there on the lovely lady on the left. It's really low effort, and this is a high impact resource in the sense that this is another way you can empower volunteers. Now they don't have to find a team lead or a staff member to find the answer to a question they're very likely to be asked over and over again. And even better than that, it keeps them from making up an answer. So win-win all around. I have tried to teach the staff on every event I've ever worked that our thanks is the only paycheck our volunteers get. I think it's been effective because our team, our clients, and even some of our extended network of contractors tease me about it. But I really don't think you can say thank you too much. If that's their paycheck, I encourage you to give them a raise, and anything you can do to show volunteers you care, in my mind, is worth doing. All right, volunteer questions. Did have one which was about volunteer timing. And really it was about what should the timing be. I think the volunteers really can guide you. If you have someone that's reaching out, you know the ones that want to interact with you beforehand and before you have a ton of information for them. It's worth cultivating them. I know it seems lower priority than something that's directly revenue producing, but as I said, you know, those folks have just as much potential to do that as well in the long run. All right, moving on from volunteers. Mitigate emergencies and risk. So here, I just want to remind everybody, we're talking about event day. Obviously, there's a lot of things that come before that in terms of mitigating risk. So reviewing your venue and vendor contracts for fairness in terms of liability, making sure you have solid waiver language in place, having appropriate insurance coverage for the events you do, making sure participants are signing your waiver and you're collecting it. I can go on and on, but just again to clarify that we're talking specifically about event day here. I try to leverage Murphy's Law in our favor when it comes to events. I figure the more time we spend on plan B or C or Z, the less likely it is we'll have to use that plan. And one thing that looks like is this specific guide that's updated for each and every event. Even this one in San Diego, where we were very unlikely to see severe precipitation or winds or lightning. So much of this guide, which the SCORE protocol you see on the left, which is stop and prepare, communicate, organize, respond, is a basic staff training that our staff go through multiple times so that we can give them just a refresher on events. The route relocation and some of the weather concerns on the right tend to zoom in a little bit more specifically for whatever event that we're on. In this case, you see in the middle right, there's no immediate shelter at the ceremony site. Probably not as much of a concern in San Diego as it would be elsewhere. On the route, luckily it has full vehicle access. There's not inaccessible areas, so that's great. And then this little kind of yellow box has the specifics for each of the key sites, and it's much longer than that. But again, just wanted to give you guys a snapshot of kind of what that specifically looks like. I swear I'm pretty sure I'd rather have a weather machine than a crystal ball. And the reason I say that is because you can go from this to this to this to this really quickly. Not generally in San Diego, but I digress. This is not San Diego. And for those who think, just so you don't think I'm being dramatic about the weather, here's a quick video clip. On the bright side, looked like this about 20 minutes later. We already had shuttles running to hotels, designated family and friend pickup locations, and a nearby laundromat where staff and volunteers were pumping quarters into industrial dryers as fast as participants could load their wet clothes into them. But let's get back to the overnight, where it has also been known to go from this to this to this to this really quickly. This is the Boston overnight. And as clear as it was for check-in and all the pre-walk activities, and you even see opening ceremony there on the top right, it began pouring and poured and poured and poured all night, right through until closing ceremony. Don't fret, there was also some good news. On the bright side there, we were already outside our relocation site. So to make the move inside required some changes to our transition plan, what tables and chairs we could condense or live without entirely, and that's shown on the top left. A new closing ceremony footprint that would fit inside a smaller space. That rough sketch site plan is shown on the top right. We also needed to let participants know, most especially because we'd made the decision to cut almost 3 miles from the route, obviously very significant. The section in question was unsheltered and very difficult to access by vehicle. So my little handwritten script edition is in the bottom left there. And in the end, we had ourselves a cozy, impactful, dry, and safe closing ceremony indoors, and that's that bottom right shot. Nicole and I were talking about it and kind of reminiscing about Boston, and saying it's interesting because sometimes events where everything goes sideways like this, particularly if you're prepared, if people feel that they're being appropriately taken care of, that they're safe, it's almost that once they're out of danger or physical discomfort, it can be even more powerful for them. Nicole, I'll kick it to you for.
Yeah, so I think, like Erica said, as long as you are prepared and people are taken care of and they can see that it's organized, it doesn't take away from their event experience at all. And we have, to this day, I mean, a lot of our walkers who did the Boston overnight really also kind of reminisce on that event and feel like they, had this incredible experience together, that it made them stronger. We actually had a walker who that was her first interaction with us. I think she had learned about the overnight and did the Boston walk because she had some personal issues that she had been struggling with, and her family came out from it. And it was such a powerful experience for her and her family that when she got back home to Detroit, she joined the walk committee there and is helping to organize one of our community walks there. So, I wouldn't get too nervous about that impacting a participant experience, because sometimes in a weird way it can even enhance it and add to it and make it a little bit unique. So
more relocation, just kidding. But it's nice that there's a bright side to it, for sure. A clear and actionable crisis plan is another great tool that you can utilize. Here's a snapshot of the table of contents of the one that we create for each overnight. This doesn't need to be an 80-page document with every eventuality that might happen outlined and scripted, although it's great if you have the time and resources to pull that off. And clients that we've worked with, that are national chapter-based organizations sometimes have someone at national who's creating, this is the communication plan that needs to be updated for each event. and the scripts and all the things that go with that. But reasonably short and simple that specifically addresses the situations you're most likely to encounter on your event can also be incredibly effective. So it's any tool, if you don't have one, is a good place to start. So this also includes staff and volunteer communication as well as participant communication. So like the Boston route update, there are times when you need to get into updating something with your staff because of something that's gone on, whether it's a temporary route closure, again, severe weather and relocation, that kind of thing. So making sure you have the tools to do that and you have the information to make those decisions is pretty key. Excuse me. So this little notification tree is part of that stop, communicate, organize, respond protocol at the start of this section, but it can be any phone or text tree or communication clusters that work best for your event. So the crisis plan is telling you what's the chain of command, who's going to be the person making decisions about whatever the specific eventuality situation is, and this tells you how to communicate it. And as you think it through ahead of time, kind of creating these clusters can save you a lot of time on event. Again, just an example, doesn't have to be intimidating, can be as simple as a phone tree kind of list, or setting up a group text ahead of time, or setting up several group texts ahead of time, depending on who needs the information, because maybe it's only the people on site, maybe it's only the people on the route, maybe it's everyone. And just thinking through those, you can have some of that set up, often in minutes, the week before the event, so that you're ready to go when event day rolls around. And this helps, obviously, when situations like this come up, participants are anxious. So having staff not be anxious and feel confident in the information that they have so that they can convey that information to participants can often be the difference between folks panicking and feeling like, oh my God, no one has any idea what's going on, versus maybe we're just waiting for the information. But being able to keep calm and have everyone have the same answer can mitigate that and keep people going, oh, okay, I'm not in danger. They're thinking about things. They know I still feel supported, and I'm okay to continue, or I understand why I can't, if that's the messaging. More and more events use their official social media channels for updates. Signs like this one up top most typically are used in competitive endurance events like marathons, half marathons, triathlons. They can also be useful to communicate with participants about the particular conditions of the course. And these are things you can have either at the anchor site itself or along your route. You can also have participants opt in for text messages. I know many folks are doing that now. There are things like rainout.com, easytexting.com, textedly.com. There's a number of free and paid services. So all of those are things that events are using. And again, it's how tech savvy your participant base is, where are they getting their information, how are you communicating with them. But being able to communicate these updates and change support plans on the fly is really predicated on knowing where your people and supplies and vehicles are. The more good real-time information you have, the better equipped you are to confidently make quick decisions about event changes. And I wanted to include these snapshots of a couple of what we call road dispatch boards, because that information can be collected in a really low-tech, inexpensive way. You don't need a giant, fully wired command center that looks like, the fire department is ready to handle a mass casualty. This can be happening in a tent, in a basement, with, an erasable board and a handful of markers and people and phones, just kind of collecting data and organizing it in a way that you can see, we have, 3 buses sitting here that we can send wherever, or we have X, Y, or Z sitting closest, even though that's not the truck we would like to send, it's the truck that's the closest. And if time is of the essence, those are really good data points to be able to pull from. We are just about at the end of our time. Are there other questions? that have come in? No? Okay. I'm just going to quickly kind of recap our 5 steps for event day success. Step 1, designing the right event is basically about knowing what you're trying to accomplish and what your resources are. I really do believe that you can make it great on any budget, and I really do believe that even a big budget can't save you if you don't have your act together. So we've seen some really low quality expensive events and some really high quality grassroots events. You know, doing the planning, how are you going to lay the groundwork for a successful event day? Like, all of that starts so far ahead of time, and sometimes you have to just do the best you can with the time that you have. But if you're thinking about it from early on, I think that's a good step to getting yourself to a successful place with whatever time you have available. Staffing, what have you done to make sure your staff is ready? Can you be doing more? Do they need more? What are you doing that you can stop doing because something else will be more useful? Is your volunteer program all it can be? Keep doing the good stuff you're doing, but are there things you can add? Do you not know? Maybe you can ask some of your key volunteers their biggest wins and biggest frustrations with your organization over the years. That can be an eye-opening conversation. And finally, just, are you ready for the situations that are most likely to come up? You may not know what all of them are, but you know what a good chunk of them are, I would think, a good chunk of the time. And then in terms of final questions, it looks like some of the question about whether some of the examples will be available. Yes, we will share the deck. There will be an email that goes out, just like your registration email, that will share Mark's CAPEX's peer-to-peer guide. That has a short article kind of highlighting what we've covered in this session, just in a quick little one-pager, but we'll PDF and share the deck as well, or a link to the deck in that email as well. Other questions? Sorry, just scrolling real quick. All right, great. And the budgeting one, the budgeting one, please email me. I would love to talk more about that or help you out with some examples. We've reached just about the end of our session time. Thank you guys again so much for joining us. If you are attending the next conference session too, you need to log out now and then log back into that next session using the link and dial-in number that you got when you registered. Thanks again, and please reach out to us with additional questions. We really appreciate your time this morning.
Thanks, everybody. Nicole, Erica, thanks for a great session, and everybody have a great virtual lunch or whatever meal in your time zone. We'll hopefully see you again at the top of the next hour. I'm going to stop the recording now. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.